Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of ATL Prime Sports. Todd Corder here in the ATL, JJ with me on the other side of the ATL, and Wayne, our producer in Memphis. Good evening, guys. I missed you last week while I was on vacation.
Yeah, it's good to have you back, man. Gus Malzahn's heading to Central Florida, replaces Josh Heupel, who went to Tennessee, had 68 wins in an 8-year period. So, hey, I'm doing pretty good. Gus Malzahn's doing pretty good. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself there in snowy Memphis, Wayne?
Well, it is cold, it's snowy, and I've stayed inside every chance I could. I did have to take out some garbage and recycle stuff, and also took a ton of pictures during all the snow.
Yeah, speaking of that, you can catch those on Twitter. Speaking of football, we've got a guest this evening, Cory McCartney. He'll be coming on in about 10 minutes or so. Baseball Writers of America, Association of America, also Football Writers Association of America, and a Heisman Trophy voter. He will be here to talk college football at the end of the segment, and we'll do Braves baseball at the beginning of the segment. Also, Dave Cohen will be joining us, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers, in about 45 minutes. We're going to be talking Atlanta Falcons, who stays, who goes on offense and defense. And before we do all that, you can get a hold of us, all of us, at ATL Prime Sports. Get a hold of myself at Corder, C-O-R-D-E-R, Todd, at JJ Get You One, and Wayne at WRWY Jr. You can get a hold of us on Twitter. You can check out Wayne's pictures of the snowy winter wonderland in Graceland outside of Memphis. And here tonight, we could have some potential icy spots, black ice in the morning. But let's forget all the weather meteorology stuff. Let's get to what we do best. It's sports. And let's talk about the Atlanta Braves. You know what? I just cannot believe when I read this story from Bill Bakota, MLB.com. He did the projections of the NL East. He put the New York Mets at 96 and 66. And, that sort of surprised me. But the part that shocked me is he put the Atlanta Braves not first, not second, not third, fourth. Thank you for the four fingers. At 82 and 80. I couldn't believe it, behind the Nats and the Phillies. Guys, I don't know about you, but I was shocked. And the reason I was shocked, and we'll all elaborate it on, is that the Braves made additions to their starting rotation with Charlie Morton and Drew Smyly in the offseason to go on with Ian Anderson, Mike Soroka, and Max Fried. Of course, Mike Soroka had an injury, so he won't be back until, midsummer is what they're projecting him to come back. So, with that injury he had last season. So it shocked me. The Braves did re-sign their slugger in the middle. And, that was a good move, obviously, with that lineup with Marcell Ozuna. So, the team is pretty much intact, but they did lose Mark Melancon, the closer, and I think that's a big loss. But let's go ahead and piece this club down first as we give an overview. Let's start with the rotation, JJ, of the Braves. I don't see how this team finishes 82 and 80 with that rotation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not taking any credit away from the Mets. They have done a lot with their team in the offseason. They made a lot of acquisitions, a lot of good moves. A lot of their players last year are getting better. We all know Pete Alonso, Rookie of the Year a couple years ago, had a little bit of a down year in the 60-game season, but he'll bounce back. He will. He's an all-pro. But I just don't see the Braves at 82 and 80. I don't see them a 2-game over 500 team. The previous years past, 3 years to be exact, they were picked at least second or lower in the division. They've won the division 3 years in a row. So here we are, underdogs again if you're a Braves fan. But fourth, I don't think so. You mentioned the additions of Smyly and Charlie Morton. Well, they also get a healthy Soroka back, and they missed him a lot in the playoffs last year.
Difference makers
Soroka
of
healthy. Ian Anderson pitched some exquisite innings down the stretch, especially in the league championship series last year. And of course, we got the youngster Bryce Wilson, who's got a lot of good reviews, got all the right stuff according to the scouts. That's going to be your rotation. I mentioned this to you off the air, TC. This is going to be a 5, 6, 7, 8-man rotation. I think Major League Baseball is moving to that in general because guys just don't pitch as much. But I just don't see 82 and 80. I see this team competing. I have them winning the division. I just think the additions of Morton and Smiley will get them over the top. I think of Marcell Ozuna. They got a closer in Will Smith. They got A.J. Minter. They got Jacob Webb, who came on again at the end of the year. I just don't see this team being 82 and 80.
All right. We've done all that. Let's talk about the rotation because to me, that has to be the strength of the club if they're going to compete with whoever they have to compete with. If they make the playoffs, if they win the division, these are all ifs because it's so early. But you look at the rotation, Ian Anderson, we got a small sample size of him last year. It'll be very interesting to see what he does in a 162-game season. I'm thinking this club will stay with a 5-man rotation for the most part. Maybe if they've got to play some 7-inning doubleheaders, which they're going to do this season, maybe they go to a 6-man rotation. But to me, Ian Anderson was huge down the stretch, and he was really huge in the playoffs. And if the Braves are going to take that next step from the NLCS to the world, to get to the World Series, to upend a team like the Dodgers, to me, that is a huge key.
Very huge key. It's all about pitching when it matters. You can score all the runs you want to. TC, you and I have mentioned this on and off air before, on this show before. It's about pitching when it comes time to a 7-game series in October. The Braves ran out of it at the end of last year. Hopefully Morton and Smiley can add those extra innings in the starting rotation that the Braves just didn't get from Fultonevich, who tried last year, Sean Newcomb, who tried last year, all the other Kevin Gausman, all of them. I mean, it's so many pitchers last year were used by the Atlanta Braves. Hopefully these two guys, along with Ian Anderson, Fried, and Soroka, and then throw in Bryce Wilson on maybe a 7-inning doubleheader or a call-up, I think they can be effective. So I'm with you. That rotation is the key. They got better. They re-signed their slugger Marcell Ozuna, and folks, they still have the reigning MVP in Freddie Freeman. They still got a solid catcher in Travis d'Arnaud. This lineup is good. They can score runs, and if they give that pitching staff some run support, I'm telling you, this club can do some things.
Okay, let's stick with the pitching. You mentioned the lineup briefly. I'm sorry, Wayne, go ahead.
I had a question. We're talking about pitching. Have they chosen any other closers besides Smith?
Well, I mentioned, it's a great question because I was going right to the relief.
Oh, okay.
I mentioned the loss of Mark Melancon. To me, he was their best reliever last year. You lose him. Shane Green is pitched as a setup guy. He did pitch up for a setup or for a closer in Detroit, but closing games in Detroit in September is a lot different than closing games in September and October for Atlanta. It's just not a comparison. There's always pressure to close a game, but to be able to close one in a pennant race or in the playoffs is totally different. And to me, this loss is going to have to be replaced. I mean, JJ's mentioned the guys, the numerous guys that can do it, but to me, this is a huge loss.
I think it is a huge loss, but I do think Chris Martin's still there. I mentioned A.J. Minter, Dayton, the new acquisition in Joseph and Jacob Webb, who came on at the end of the year. They're going to have to make another signing. Is it going to be Shane Green? Are they going to make another call to another guy? Maybe Darren O'Day makes another comeback. The submarine pitcher with a good sinking motion on the end of his fastball. It gets a lot of ground ball outs when needed, and he did that in the playoffs last year. So maybe they re-sign one more closer or setup guy or 7th inning guy, and that would be a relief to Melanson, who is a big gap, TC, and you are correct about that. I don't know if they can fill that void, but they can sure try. Chris Martin's a pretty good category, a guy that can do that, and I think they'll be just fine. I really do. I think they can still score runs with the best of them. Without Melanson, they got to sign one guy. If they do it, I think they'll be just fine. But if they don't, that's where the void becomes a question mark.
Let's shift over to the lineup because Cory McCartney is going to be calling in about a minute or so. You mentioned the signing of Marcell Ozuna. They got him at their price. The rumors were they were going to have to pay a lot more. They did not. But, you know, the question now, there will not be a DH unless there's a last minute, minute change. Will mean Marcell Ozuna is going to have to play a lot of games in left field. And they'll have to replace him if the game is tight and they're up by a run with a defensive replacement in the ninth inning.
Yeah,
but Ozuna's signing, Wayne, was huge from the middle of the lineup protecting Freddie Freeman. And then now that there is no DH, it's huge again. He's got to play the outfield some.
Yeah. Now, it's does Atlanta's catcher sometimes fill in that DH role?
Travis Deonard?
Yeah.
No, well, I don't know if they
– a little bit, but that was when Marcell Ozuna would play left field, and we shifted that around quite often. But most of the time, and when it mattered, Marcell Ozuna was the DH.
All right.
Yeah, we're going to find out. That's for sure. We're expecting Cory McCartney to be calling in any moment from ATL Prime Sports, Baseball Writers Association of America, Heisman Trophy voter. A lot of he's written a couple of books. We'll be bringing him on shortly, and we'll expect him in a minute. Wayne, have you gave him the invite, correct?
Yeah, I sent it to him.
So he should be calling in shortly. Once again, he's a Baseball Writers Association of America member and Football Writers Association of America and a Heisman Trophy winner. So we're expecting him in. He's got a couple of books out, Tales from the Atlanta Braves Dugout and the Heisman Trophy, the story of an American icon and its winner. So I can't wait for him to come on. Guys, we'll just continue to talk about this Braves club. Let's stick with the starting lineup. I mean, it's really good. I mean, I guess, you know, they've been playing with the leadoff hitter spot for quite a while. You know, they always try a Coon up there, but it seems like, he's more comfortable in the middle. But, it'll be interesting who they bat and leadoff. They tried out Ozzie Albies. They moved him up first, second to ninth. Let's see who you guys think the leadoff hitter is going to be.
It's got to be Acuna. He's the best leadoff hitter I've ever seen. You get on base, he gets to second. He obviously gets to third. And there was a stat at some point last year, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but when he got on to lead off a game, he scored an unbelievable percentage of the time. When you have a threat that can get on base like that, steal second, get you into a runner in scoring position with the NL MVP Freddie Freeman coming up with 1 or 2 outs, that's a huge advantage. Acuna is your leadoff guy. The only exception to the rule is if Ender Inciarte somehow gets his baseball bat back and he is able to hit at a high clip, he is a decent leadoff hitter when he can produce, but he hasn't produced in a couple seasons. That's the question mark in this lineup. If Ender Inciarte can compete in the batter's box as well as he can as a Gold Glove center fielder, this Braves franchise may take a bigger step than people think. If he can stay healthy, and he's proven it, when Ender is healthy, he is a very tough out. A very tough out. So I think that's the biggest question mark on this team right now is Ender Inciarte and what he does in the batter's box for this Atlanta Braves franchise. And again, it's going to be a young guy coming up, another big-time Major League Baseball prospect.
Sticking with the outfield, Christian Pache.
Pache is a wonderful player. He's got all the tools. He can throw, he can hit, he can run, he can field, and he can hit for power. So the guy's got it all. And if he puts it together, again, you may not see Ender. But if Ender is competing in the batter's box and swinging a good stick, he's one of the best center fielders in the game. The defensive strategy of this team is going to be great. They were good last year. They'll be pretty good this year. Again, the only question mark on the outfield defensively is Marcell Ozuna. How many times will be out there late in innings? But it's it. This is great.
So if Marcell Ozuna goes to left field, Austin Riley's going to play a lot of third base.
Going to play a lot of third base. And that's the last.
That's where he's comfortable.
He's comfortable. He's great at defense. We saw some extremely good plays at the hot corner in the championship series. He started off the league championship series with a big bomb. Was very quiet the rest of it. He has the ability to become a big-time player. Will he? That's the question here, too. Those two players, Ender Inciarte, Austin Riley, if they can give you 250 at the plate, this Braves team is going to be really tough to beat, Todd.
Well, Freddie Freeman obviously is the glue of the offense. I mean, he's still the club's best player with the bat. His contract is coming up, and you look at Liberty Media and their history of spending, which is, it's not like it was when Ted owned the Braves in the 90s. Let's just face it. When John Sherholtz wrote a book out, book that came out, Built to Win, he was talking about Liberty Media and how they were trying to win around their payroll. And, there were stories trying to sign Tom Glavine. It didn't work out. He went to the Mets. Now, Freddie Freeman's their Chipper Jones today. Is that fair to say?
100% fair to say.
Right. So they signed Chipper. I'm assuming they'll sign Freddie. They better sign him. I mean, this is a team.
Braves fans are nails.
Well, this team, a lot of clubs, there's been articles out regarding Liberty Media. Will they spend enough to win? And I mean, you look at the Dodgers payroll. I mean, it's like what, 260 million, and then it's more than 5 payrolls of the bottom tier at 220 million. The Pirates involved in that. The Raiders are involved in that. I believe the A's are. I mean, this Dodgers payroll is even better than the Yankees, and they just signed Trevor Bauer. So they're going to stick in Trevor Bauer with the league's top rotation, and fans are still going to expect Atlanta to compete. But of course, that Dodgers bullpen has always been its Achilles heel, like it was Atlanta's in the 90s. That's why the loss to me in Melanson hurts, because he not only stays in the National League, he goes to one hell of a team. Wasn't it San Diego that he signed with?
San Diego, yes.
So, golly, I mean, right now, I have the Braves third among the teams in the NL. I have them behind the Dodgers. I have them behind the Padres. Where do you have them?
See, I agree with you. I think the Padres, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, the starting rotation that we haven't even mentioned is unbelievable. They're a top 5 rotation, top 6 rotation. Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, Lamont, Paddock, Musgrove. I mean, that's a sweet starting rotation.
They added two guys in the rotation. Now you're talking about the Padres in the rotation. Joe Musgrove comes over Pittsburgh. They have a great rotation. The Dodgers, you got to remember, they've got 3 of the top 20 pitchers in baseball. There's a lot of teams that don't even have one top 20 rotation guy.
You forgot the world champions didn't even have David Price on their
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was coming with that. Thank you. He didn't even pitch last year.
Yeah, he didn't even pitch. Left-hander. He's a Cy Young type pitcher. Unbelievable. This roster, this may be one of the best rosters assembled in baseball. They got Turner, Josh Turner, Justin Turner, excuse me, who's played an unbelievable hot corner. He got a great swing. He's been a power hitter, and he put that team on his back in the league championship series last year against the Braves and got them back into from a 3-1 deficit. He had a great batting line against the Braves in that league championship series. This Dodgers roster from top to bottom, Maybe the best baseball roster I've ever seen.
It is. It's an amazing one. And speaking of we've got an amazing guest this evening. Cory McCartney joins us on the hotline. Cory is a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America and also the Football Writers Association of America and a Heisman Trophy voter, excuse me. He wrote 2 books, Tales from the Atlanta Braves Dugout and the Heisman Trophy, the story of an American icon and its winners. Cory McCartney, welcome to ATL Prime Sports with TC, JJ, and our producer, Wayne in Memphis. How are you today? All right, we just gave you a beautiful introduction, but we'll just go ahead and go. Thanks so much for coming on. Sorry for the troubles there. I'm so glad you joined us. I got it. JJ and I and Wayne talked about it. I'm just going to go right to it. The MLB.com article with Bill Precoda, who gives us projections every year, has the Mets at 96 and 66. But the shocker to me is the Braves in 4th at 82 and 80. I know they lost they lost Mark Melanson, but they picked up Charlie Morton and Drew Smiley in the rotation. They signed back, Ozuna. So, the club is pretty much ready to rock and roll. And, I know the Mets had some additions with Francisco Lindor and, at short, and Carlos Carrasco at starting pitcher and James McCann at catcher, and they've got a nice rotation. But, Cory, how in God's world are they 16 games better potentially than the Braves, or 14?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of set, Braves Twitter on fire a little bit when they sent out those Dakota predictions. And, I read kind of an interesting breakdown on why they were kind of soured on the Braves a little bit. And I think there were some valid concerns. I think there are some question marks within the pitching. I mean, certainly, Mike Soroka is going to be out potentially until June. That, I think, could be delayed when you consider the fact that he's going to now have to swing a bat and run the bases. I think that without the DH, that kind of changes things a little bit. You think there's going to be some regression for Ian Anderson. I don't think he can be that spectacularly good. I think he's a great top of the rotation piece for the long term, but I don't know that he can be that great in his first full season. And then certainly, Drew Smiley, I think in my estimation, they overpaid for Drew Smiley, and you don't really know what you're getting. So a certain amount of time, you're going to have a fifth starter step into this too. Is it going to be Kyle Wright? Is it going to be Bryce Wilson? Are they finally going to be able to put together consistency, something that's certainly been an issue for them? So I think from a pitching standpoint, there are concerns. I think offensively, yeah, I mean, certainly Freddie Freeman is the reigning MVP. You bring back Ozuna. You've obviously got Ronald Acuna Jr. Is Ozzie Albies going to look more like he did in 2019 instead of 2020? Is the 2020 Dansby Swanson what he's going to be going forward? I think this lineup is so top heavy. I think you can really have some question marks when you get outside of that first 4 guys about what happens afterwards. So I'm not necessarily saying this team is going to finish 4th place in this division, but certainly I can understand why people might have some question marks about the Braves in 21.
You're listening to Cory McCartney, Baseball Writers Association of America member, Heisman Trophy voter. A pretty cool gig, I must assume. And I'm going to ask you straight up, Cory, where do you think this Dodgers team finished? Are we crowning them National League champions, maybe even repeat World Series champions? Are you giving some credit to the San Diego Padres and their acquisitions this offseason? Where do you see the Dodgers finishing in the NL West?
I think the Dodgers are still the team. I mean, I think one thing you can't discount in 2021 is having a litany of arms, because I think that's going to be a driving force for everybody. Because, last year, I mean, certainly, they won it all, and they won it all with great pitching, but guys did not log massive innings last year. It just wasn't part of the equation in 60 games. I don't think 200 innings is a reality for people in 21. I think you're going to see teams be a little more safeguarded with how much they ride their top arms. So I think depth is going to be a major piece of this. And certainly when you think about the Dodgers, they have, think about that rotation with May and Julio Urias. I mean, they've got so many different pieces they can roll out there. That to me is a major factor why I picked them over the Padres. I think the Padres have done a great deal to shore things up, but I think they're an arm away from going toe to toe with the Dodgers in that way. But certainly it's going to be interesting out west. I think everyone's going to be pinpointing that as, along with the NL East with the Braves and the Dodgers, is the best division races in baseball in 21.
When we look at the Dodgers and the run they've had, 7, 8 straight division titles in a row, it does remind me a lot of Atlanta in the 90s. Great starting rotation, get to the playoffs, bullpen ends up being suspect, and they lose. Last year, they got it done in a not a strike-shortened season, but a COVID-shortened season of 60 games. The Braves did it in a strike-shortened season of 95, playing 140. So, when I look at this Dodgers team and the Braves of the 90s, there's a lot of comparisons. To me, you can get to the Dodgers, even though they've got this great rotation, their bullpen is still not fixed.
I don't know that's maybe – look, I think you can pinpoint a lot of the issues that Kenley Jansen has had the last couple of years and take that as, gospel for the entirety of this Dodgers bullpen. But, Brusdar Graterol, if you saw – that kid last year throwing, John Smoltz, lets throwing 100 with ease. Kid throws so hard he literally broke his chain last year. The thing just fell off his neck with the force going so hard. But they've got Joe Kelly, obviously. They've got Santana. They've got Blake Triton. They just have so many pieces. Dylan Floro. They have so many different guys in that, and that's just a right-handed options. Certainly, Garrett Clevenger. Adam Kolarek. They just go on and on with the bullpen options that the Dodgers have. I think maybe you can say, yeah, you need that one horse. I don't know that baseball exists like that in 21. It's great to have that closer that you feel like is going to lock things down. But I think so many teams play matchups now. And I think the Dodgers in particular have shown that they've bulked up to the point where they can definitely do that. And you don't feel like it's Kenley or bust for this team right now.
Corey, going to ask you a quick question. I want your opinion. Do you want to see the universal DH in the National League? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. I think most pitchers, I know there's guys that love to hit. I know Max Fried from the Braves in particular. This is a guy who I've seen, just drop some bombs in batting practice. But I think by and large, these guys would love to just do their job and go sit down. And I think, from the union standpoint, you're talking about 15 more jobs, right? You're talking about guys getting 3-4 extra years, in their baseball lives because of the existence of the designated hitter in the National League. So, I think if there was a DH in the National League, Josh Donaldson's probably still an Atlanta Brave, right? I think that was a big factor for them letting him walk to Minnesota, was that they just didn't want to eat into those years into his 30s. So, I love it. I think it's good for the game. How many of these pitchers who just have not picked up a bat in years by the time they get to the major? So I think it's for the best that we transition to this. I think it's going to come with the 2021 CBA in December. Obviously, they'll start negotiating that going forward.
Wow, speaking of Donaldson, I'm not so sure if they would have signed it because you know how it is. This isn't the 90s. This isn't Ted Turner. Liberty Media does stick with a budget. John Sherrills came out with that book, Built to Win, and he talked about the famous word was payroll constraints, winning under our payroll constraints. I don't know if they would have paid that Donaldson that type of money. Look what they got Ozuna for.
Well, they just didn't want to go to a fourth year for him, and that was because of the age. So I think, I think that changes in the DH climate.
It may. There's no doubt. Let's switch over to the Braves' competitor, the Mets. Like I said, they added Lindor, they added Carrasco, they added McCann. It's a good rotation. DeGrom, Stroman, Carrasco, obviously Peterson. This is going to be a pretty good rotation for New York. DeGrom is, he's right there with anybody in baseball. But, Marcus Stroman never pitched last year. You mentioned the innings limits. You mentioned Ian Anderson having to compare to what are they going to do with him pitching? JJ mentioned earlier on the show, there's probably going to see some 6-man rotations. You're unfortunately going to have 7-inning double hitters. So, and you're going to have to start with a man that's starting on second base. We'll ask you what you think about those rules in a minute. But this is going to be an interesting year, testing a lot of arms like Stroman and Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Mets are going to be so deep too. I mean, we haven't even talked about Noah Syndergaard, right? I mean, another guy that's coming back from Tommy John surgery, who could potentially be back in June or July. So that is going to be one seriously deep rotation too. I mean, I think Stroman basically becomes like a new acquisition for them since he didn't pitch last year, and DeGrom is obviously, as you said, that he is as good as it gets. I think Carlos Carrasco has by and large been underrated. I mean, this is a guy who's been, you go back 4 or 5 years, this guy's been a top 8-9 pitcher in terms of Fangraphs WAR. So this is a huge addition for them as well. And obviously what they did offensively, adding Lindor. I think they still are a piece away. I think they need a center fielder. I think Jackie Bradley Jr. That's the obvious choice for him to land in New York. And obviously that's a Boris guy. And, you think about Mike Moustakas, every year there's that JD Martinez, there's that one Boris client that he holds on too long, whether he overinflates the value in terms of the money or the years. That's Jackie Bradley Jr. in 2021. So I think he ultimately ends up in New York. Brandon Nimmo is just not a center fielder. And you add Bradley to that mix. I mean, there's a reason that they're picked to win the division.
It's interesting you mentioned Jackie Bradley because Jim Bowden said it the former Reds GM on MLB radio this weekend. I happened to catch that. He said if you get, Jackie Bradley, if you overpay for him, which you're going to have to do because it's a Boris client, he said that would put the Mets over the top and win the division. And, maybe not. But it's interesting you mentioned that, and you mentioned Boris. I thought that was so ironic. And then, you said about Stroman. We mentioned him not pitching. Look at Mike Soroka. When will he come back? Will he come back? Is that going to be June, July? When is that going to be?
So June was the deadline that was discussed loosely after the injury last year when you start talking about timetables. Nothing's been concrete at this point. And I think a lot of the reason things weren't concrete is because you just didn't know if there was going to be a DH, because I do think that is a factor in this because it's no longer that he just has to be concerned about how does the foot feel when you plant off the mound? How does it feel when you're going through your follow through? How does it go? How does it feel when you're, fielding a ground ball? Now it becomes a matter of how does the foot feel when you plant to swing? How does that foot feel when you're running to first base? I think those are different variables at play that, I think to me could end up lengthening it and maybe making it closer to the All-Star break. I hope for Mike's sake that's not the case. I know he's been working really hard to get back. But, the fact that they didn't know, I think that does play a role in how much longer it's going to be before he's on the mound.
You're listening to ATL Prime Sports with myself, JJTC, and our wonderful producer, Wayne out in Memphis, Tennessee, Cory McCartney right here, Baseball Writers Association of America. I'm going to ask you, who do you think wins the MVP this year? Who's your preseason MVP favorite, Cory?
I think because if he had played the entirety of last year, he might have been MVP anyway. I'm going to take Juan Soto in the National League. He would have beat out Freddie Freeman in every statistical category that mattered if he would have played the entirety of 2020. So I'll take Soto. And I'm just going to stick with the obvious in the American League. They got him some help, and I think he's going to be rejuvenated. So I'm taking Mike Trout to pull down another one in the AL.
You know what? You can't go wrong with either pick, but I'm going to stun you. I think Freddie Freeman goes back to back.
Ooh.
He didn't play all season last year either, and thanks to COVID. And he's got Ozuna protecting him for a full season. And guess what? You know what he's got coming up? We all know what motivates these guys too. He's got, a signing. He's due to make some big money. So if he could get back-to-back NL MVPs, he's got one heck of a motivation. Cory, do you think the Braves get it done? Signing Freddie.
I think it gets done before opening day. I don't think you want the reigning National League MVP and a cornerstone of your franchise to hear questions throughout the year about his contract status. I don't think they want Freddie. I've had many conversations with him about this. He obviously wants to stay in Atlanta, just like Chipper. He understands the power of staying with one organization, and this one in particular in his mind. So I just don't think that they'll want to do that to him for the year. So I do think it gets done before opening day.
Wow.
We'll see. You know what? That part stunned me. I thought it would go on until the off season, till the collecting a bargain agreement ended and all that. But you may be right. Let me ask you this: do the Braves need? Now they lost Melanson. Do they need another guy in that back end of the bullpen? Because JJ and I think they do.
Well, I think they do, but I don't necessarily think it's the heavy hitter that maybe a lot of people want to think that it is, because you got to remember they spent a lot of money on Will Smith last fall, and he was horrendous, right? I mean, I don't think there was any discounting how bad he was. I mean, a 4.50 ERA. He was a minus WAR for the first time in his career. I mean, he just got lit up. So I think this is a guy, obviously, who has all-star closing experience. He saved 30-plus games in 2019 for the Giants. So I think you can go out and add in. I know Trevor Rosenthal's out there. You can add that kind of an arm. I have some questions about him, especially on the age. But I certainly think, you can get by with Smith believing that he's going to get back to form a little bit. Remember, he missed the beginning of last year with COVID too. I mean, he was out and was not himself. So I think they could afford to either add a marginal piece or hope that one of their young arms can become that when they're in camp.
Shane Green, he's had closer experience with Detroit, but we mentioned it earlier in the show. Closing to Detroit in September right now is way different than closing in Atlanta in September and potentially October. I don't like Green in the back end. Not at the ninth, maybe the 7th or 8th inning spot. What are your thoughts on Shane Green?
So when he made his Braves debut, I was sitting in the press box, and he comes out and they start playing, Jeezy, Get On For My City, and they've got like this video intro for him, and it's got green lights, and it's like, this crazy light show. And then he goes out there and gets lit up. And sometimes I think, you can say, okay, jitters of the playing for a new team, going through trying to, endear yourself to a fan base. It took him a long time to kind of find his groove in Atlanta. And I don't think I think you guys are right. I don't think it's in the 9th inning. I think he sets up so much better because while he was a closer in Detroit, he was an all-star closer, kind of those secondary numbers, the FIP and, a lot of the XFIP, the stuff that you look at that takes away the defense behind him and puts it squarely on him. The numbers were not good. They were kind of a little step down from what I think the resume said with him being an all-star. So I think he's a solid bullpen option, but I don't think he is necessarily the guy you want closing a game for a team that's trying to win a division and potentially a World Series.
All right. Hey, Corey, this is Wayne in Memphis, Tennessee. And, I know there's been a lot of talk about the Dodgers, the Mets in Atlanta on this show, but what do you think about St. Louis upcoming year? I mean, they've probably got one of the deepest pitching of any team in the NL.
Yeah, they do. And obviously, you go out and make the acquisition they did in Arenado. I know there's some people in Oakland that will put up a fight over this, but I think they have the best corner set up in baseball now with Goldschmidt and Arenado. I think those two combined are just – I know Arenado, Goldschmidt had a bit of a down year last year, but you look over these last 5, he's been a top 3 first baseman. You combine him with Arenado and a guy who's really the Gold Glove standard of that position. And then you mentioned the pitching. I mean, getting Wainwright back, for them, a big deal. Jack Flaherty, I think, is obviously the main cog. He was not great last year. Made some bucks, but I think he's set up to have a really good year this year, I think. And while the Cubs have kind of backed off a little bit in the Central, they have certainly bulked up, and I think it's hard to pick over anybody with St. Louis in that division.
Corey, let's just stick with that division since we're sitting there. They got the Brewers winning this division this year, and they got St. Louis finishing 500, does Bakota. I thought to myself, I got St. Louis winning this thing. What are your thoughts on the Central?
Yeah, I like the Cardinals. I think, Yelich wasn't great in 20. Obviously not MVP level as we had seen for him from before. But to me, I just think the Cardinals, when you think about what they've added, they've got one of the best players in baseball. And I don't know that, I think everyone sees Nolan Arenado's name, pop up in those those Silver Slugger, Gold Glove finalist winner runs at the end of the year. But this is a guy who hasn't gotten a ton of opportunities to play into the fall. And I think that's going to change this year, and people are going to realize that this is the best third baseman in this generation. And I think he's going to be sure to be let people know that this year in St. Louis.
All right. There is JJ's going to go ahead with a college football question and end it. I've got one before that. You know, we haven't talked Washington and their great rotation of Scherzer, Corbin, Strasburg, and Lester. This team to me is going to be in it. If they hit, like you mentioned, Juan Soto, they're going to be in it. And we haven't mentioned the Phillies with Dave Dombrowski. He's kind of retooling them. You know, this is going to be one heck of a division. And then foremost, the Marlins, who was in the Final Four last year. Obviously, nobody thinks Florida's going to do it. They got them picking last. And to me, Corey, JJ and I said this to me is an old school club. They like to put the ball on the grass, the rug, in some places on turf. They like to, you know, old school, hit and run, a little bit taking a base. They don't have a lot of power. They do have some. You know, where do you see these three teams in the East?
Yeah, I really like the Nationals. Obviously, I think it's interesting that they took some flyers on a couple of guys that, you know, Josh Bell 2 years ago was in the home run derby. You know, has a 30 home run first half of the season, and I think, you know, just a guy who was pressing in the second half, and he just hasn't been the same since. You take a flyer on him and what he potentially could provide. And obviously, you know, Kyle Schwarber, you know, you got to play him in left field now. Juan Soto switches over to right. Victor Robles is going to have to cover a lot of ground, but they have the potential of a lot of power with those two. And, you know, it's interesting when you think about how good Francisco Lindor has been these past few years. And, you know, a lot of people consider him to be the best shortstop in baseball. Trey Turner is just below him in weighted run created plus in Fangraphs WAR. Turner is an elite shortstop that I don't know necessarily gets the love sometimes. It's easy to get lost in a team when you have Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg and Soto coming on like he has these past few years. The Nationals going to be very, very good. Obviously, the Phillies, you know, I think it was big for them bringing back Didi. You know, I think to get Gregorius back, you know, Alec Baum, can he take the next step? You know, I mean, he's obviously shown some signs of what he's able to do at third, but I don't think this is a guy who's going to wow anybody defensively, but this is a really solid bat. I have some questions about what Scott Kingery is going to be, if that's your everyday center fielder. Certainly the big one for them, getting Real Muto back. They're going to be extremely good. And when you talk about the Marlins, I mean, I get it. I mean, they surprised everybody last year on what they were able to do, and, you know, to be able to make the postseason in just a really obviously odd year. Behind some really great pitching. You know, I just think it's kind of inevitable, though, that we're going to see these young arms kind of take a bit of a step back. I mean, Sixto Sanchez is a huge talent. Sandy Alcantara is a huge talent. But, you know, I just don't know that those guys are going to – I don't know that Alcantara is going to live in that, you know, 3.0 to sub 3.0 ERA at this point in his career. I think there's going to be bumps in the road with that team. And I just don't think they have enough offensively to kind of make up for the bad days that they have from that pitching staff. So, you know, there's good things happening in Miami. It's just for the duration of 162 games, it's just hard to put them above any other teams in this division.
Corey, I'm going to change subjects on you, big college football guy. Want to ask you a two-parter. You're a Heisman Trophy voter. What do you look for when you're voting for your Heisman Trophy winner? And give us some maybe extremely early Heisman favorites for this coming fall.
You know, so I've been voting for the Heisman since 2006, 2007. So I was at Sports Illustrated, and that was kind of how I got on doing the Heisman. I was their guy. I would cover the award from the summertime with the magazine, so you'd have the centerfold in there. I'd do that along with all throughout the season, covering it, and then take it into the winter with the ceremony. So, you know, I think for me, there's things I look at in the summertime. You know, you start looking at guys who, you know, kind of have that pedigree to them. Obviously, in these past 6 years, you kind of have to think about that kind of come from nowhere candidate that we've seen, Lamar Jackson. You know, obviously Kyler Murray, these guys that, you know, you don't necessarily expect, Jameis Winston, Johnny Manziel, to come out of nowhere and take the award. So I think it's changed over the years. You know, I think for a long time there, it was kind of the next man up on certain teams. And you think about USC going from Leinart to Bush, and then obviously, Oklahoma, you had White, and then you had, Peterson come along, and you would look for certain elements like that. I think, by and large now you're thinking about recruiting rankings and how quickly does this guy fit into the equation and how quickly can he make an impact. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see a true freshman win. I think that's the one thing that we'll never see. But certainly, there are. It's been a changing thing for years now, and look, when you talk about 2021, I mean, I think Spencer Rattler, this is the guy who, showed you a ton last year. Breece Hall had a fantastic year at Iowa State. DJ at Clemson. I don't even try to say that guy's name because he's butchered so poorly, but. DJU, we'll just call him DJU. But I think Spencer Rattler's got to be your leader going into this thing for 2021.
Corey, could you imagine calling his games? You're the play-by-play guy because I do some high school football and I'll be doing some college here next month. I mean, you'd have to practice for an hour before you get on the air. I mean, that's just a doozy. I was listening to the guy for Clemson call the games last year when I was driving up north, and he did a really good job. And I'm like, man, you were prepared.
Yeah, I tell you, when they played Notre Dame, though, I mean, I thought Tirico, they had a Samoan, Notre Dame had a Samoan linebacker that made a play on him, and I couldn't believe the letter chaos that he dealt with on that and just did it like it was nothing. So, I mean, that's why he's doing Notre Dame games on NBC.
Corey, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. We'll have to bring you on during the baseball season. Maybe I'll catch you around out on the baseball field like I did in the fall, and we'll talk a little bit of college football. I really thank you very much for coming on.
All right, guys. I appreciate the time.
Hey, have a great day. All right, that's Cory McCartney, Baseball Writers Association of America member and Football Writers Association of America and a Heisman Trophy voter. Guys, we got about 3 minutes for Dave Cohen. Doesn't really leave us a lot of time with the Atlanta Falcons. They did make some news. They signed a terrific salary cap expert, a tremendous contract negotiator in Chris Olsen. We're only going to really have time for one segment with the Falcons, and that is, since we're talking about Chris, can he figure out a way to get J.J. Watt to the Falcons, guys? We could use him on the defensive line.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could. The Falcons need all the help getting after the quarterback they could possibly get, and with J.J. Watt becoming now an unrestricted free agent, you'd love, as a fan, to see them make some moves and maybe go after him. But I just don't think it's physically possible with the cap space that the Falcons have. But I do think they still have significant pieces in place to compete right away with the new resume and Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot, and Dan Pease, and all the way on down with the new resume. I just think there's enough pieces staying that you can be competitive very quickly. I think if you trade back in the draft, you acquire as many picks as you possibly can to fill the voids on defense. I think the Falcons can really turn around and maybe do a worse from first. Parity is the name of the game in the NFL. You're 5 or 6 plays or 5 or 6 players away from that next opportunity. Look, the Bucs were 7-9 2 years ago. They're Super Bowl champions this year, really, with 2 players, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. It's about acquisitions, keeping your team, your nucleus together, and the Falcons have the ability to do that with keeping Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin.
Well, by getting Chris Olsen over from the Texans, Wayne, this is what the guy's job is. J.J. Watt's out there. Make a pitch. You don't hurt. You're not likely going to get him, but damn it, you got to try, right?
Got to try. It's like,
Wayne, what do you think?
What's the old NASCAR saying, Wayne? If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Well, I tell you, it kind of reminds me of the situation that most of us used to catch ourselves in grade school, where you decide to pass the girl the note. Do you like me? Check 1, yes or no. You might as well take the shot. Go ahead and pass the note.
That's right. Pass the note. And speaking of passing, JJ, I'm going to drug test you at the end of the show because nobody's beating the Buccaneers as of right now in the NFC South. I mean, they're not. Oh, well, you just said they possibly could. I'm like, what?
I said they have the nucleus with the ability to trade back in the draft to fill the voids they have on defense. They have the ability to be a worst to first type of team.
Go play in the snow. Speaking of the snow, oh, that's right. Wayne can go play in the snow. All right, let's circle over to Dave Cohen, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers here on ATL Prime Sports. Dave does men's basketball, football, and obviously baseball. Dave, welcome to ATL Prime Sports, and thanks for your patience this evening.
Not a problem. Always great to be with you guys. How's it going?
Pretty good.
It's going well. We're in a COVID-19 environment along with your Georgia State Panthers. They're 5th place in the East, 3-4 overall in the conference, 9-5 overall. They've only played 7 conference games. To me, that's the story. They've had cancellations, and COVID are the big story. And tomorrow's game is canceled at Troy. I'm going to ask, what about the 16th and 19th versus Troy, Dave? Dave, you there?
I'm here. I'm holding up my answer.
Fingers crossed.
Holding up my answer. Fingers crossed.
No, I couldn't see on the screen. These 4 eyes are killing me. So I had a COVID test today, so that could be part of my issue, but it came back negative, thank goodness. Well, you're crossing your fingers. How many games? I mean, they've had so many games canceled this year. And it's a good thing you know the club inside and out, so it's not killing all your prep work, right?
Well, honestly, I take it week by week because there are no midweek games. The makeup games that the Sunbelt is trying to schedule are usually scheduled for Tuesdays, like this game tomorrow night was supposed to be. That was a makeup game, basically swapping out one game for the 2 missed games. But Troy is scheduled to be here in Atlanta on Friday and Saturday. But honestly, we just take it day by day and weekend by weekend. Georgia State has now missed, as of tomorrow night, will have missed 9 games in the regular season.
That's the most in the country.
Yeah, it's got to be up there. I know it's definitely tops in the Sunbelt Conference. There are some Sunbelt Conference schools that have played almost twice as many games as Georgia State has.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's crazy. I think I was told by our sports information director, if we miss one more game, then we will automatically we could not be higher than the 6th seed in the Sunbelt Conference tournament in Pensacola that first weekend in March.
Wow, that's huge. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, it's really too bad because, we were supposed to play Georgia Southern on Thursday and Saturday of this past weekend. Well, we got the Thursday game in.
Yeah.
And Georgia State won that game 79-75 for their 9th win of the season. They were supposed to go back down on Saturday afternoon for a 3 p.m. Eastern time tip. And what we found out Friday morning was that when Georgia Southern bussed back to Atlanta Thursday night, they did apparently testing on Friday morning and they had positives, which means more than likely they played with positives on Thursday night. So that's kind of the backlash, as I understand it, as to why we're not playing the Troy game tomorrow night. Not that Georgia State has anybody that is tested positive, because I've been told that we do not, but based on contact tracing precautions, they're not going to play at Troy on Tuesday night. And again, fingers crossed that we play on Friday night and Saturday afternoon in Atlanta next weekend.
Yeah, it just drives me crazy. I just wish that, the colleges, I know it's different than the pros, but the NFL's way of handling COVID to me seemed the best way. We're playing this who's not, this is who's positive, you're out. This is who's negative, you're in. Let's go.
Yeah, well, again,
Thoughts on that?
It's a lot easier to lay down the line like that with professionals than it is, college kids, especially, again, at various levels of college athletics. You have some classes that are, a lot of virtual classes, but you do have some hybrid classes where students are going to a physical classroom.
Right.
So, and it's not consistent across the board. from Division I all the way down to Division III in NAIA. It's different, really, at a lot of institutions. So
I'm doing junior
it would be
college,
interesting.
Dave. I'm doing junior college basketball in Alabama, and it's totally different than what 1A is. I'll have to tell you off the air. It's totally different.
Yeah, I'm sure. They're going to do what they deem necessary to get these games in, but
and the financial ramifications are night and day.
Yeah, I mean that's why there's such a push to play that NCAA tournament this year, where they've moved it all to Indianapolis. They're going to use all the different available venues, and the strict regulations of the 68 teams that will end up there. I think.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot different than previous NCAA. It'll be unlike anything we've ever seen with regards to an NCAA tournament. And I think the same can probably be said for those conferences that do go on and play a regular season conference tournament, as the Sunbelt is planning on doing in Pensacola.
You're listening to ATL Prime Sports with our guest, Georgia State voice, Dave Cohen. You can find him on Twitter at GA State Voice. Dave, I'm going to come out and ask you about the South Alabama nationally televised game at ESPN2. You guys haven't played as many conference games as you'd like. What is a national televised game like this going to do for the GSU basketball program? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing this year? I mean, exposure is always a good thing, but national TV's always got to help, right?
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt, and especially at the what we'll call the mid-major league level, the group of 5 level. We saw this, when we were talking still about college football, how the Sunbelt wound up with so many nationally televised games because you had leagues that weren't playing, and slots in the nationally televised schedule had to be filled. And so the trickle-down effect worked well for the Sunbelt Conference. That's not necessarily the exact same case for basketball. The Georgia State Georgia Southern game a few weeks ago was supposed to be the Georgia State South Alabama game that got canceled in Atlanta was supposed to be nationally televised. They ended up having to move that nationally televised game, I think, to Coastal Carolina and Georgia Southern down in Statesboro. But look, it certainly doesn't hurt. There's not a coach in the country that's going to tell you he doesn't want his program featured on national television. First and foremost, for recruiting, it just puts your program out there more. The Sunbelt Conference has a contract with ESPN, mostly on the side of ESPN Plus, as you see what we do, on a home game, basis each week. But there are nationally televised games, and there's not a coach in the country that's going to tell you they don't want to be on national television, because they all want to be on national television.
Well,
especially when you're group of 5 and you're not on national television, every game like the SEC and the ACC and those Power 5 leagues are.
That makes a big difference. We did have some good news. Georgia State did beat their rival, Georgia Southern, by a couple of baskets, 79-75. Justin Roberts, had 21, and Corey Allen had 19 and 7. It was a good win, Dave. We got to start. You got to have some positivity in this environment here. Besides people getting positive for COVID.
Yeah, no question. That is a game, and this year it's a series that everybody circled at the start of the season. Georgia State, Georgia Southern is to Georgia State, Georgia Southern what Georgia Tech and Georgia is to the Georgia Tech and Georgia fans.
Right.
That is the series. Those are the games that our folks, our players, our fans, the radio crew, the TV crew, that's the game we look forward to throughout the season. And again, it's just too bad that we weren't able to play the game in Statesboro on Saturday. Now, whether or not we'll try to make that game up, I don't know, because the further you move along,
it's harder.
The conference tournament's scheduled to start March 5, which means I don't know. Well, I don't know yet how early they're going to want teams to be in Pensacola, sequestered and able to make sure that teams are healthy enough to be able to play their conference tournament games.
Dave, you mentioned conference tournaments. They were talking about it on national television this weekend. Some conferences may not have conference tournaments, and some may. You're telling me the Sunbelt most likely will.
Well, as of right now, they are. Again, March 5, 6, 7, and 8 in Pensacola. I mean, I've not heard otherwise that they're not going to do it, unless it was to get to a point where, from a health standpoint, it was too much of a risk. But as long as those games are on the schedule, then until somebody tells me they're not going to play them, then I'm assuming that, all 12 teams are going to head to Pensacola there that first weekend in March.
Again, you're listening to ATL Prime Sports. You have Dave Cohen, Georgia State Panthers voice, football, baseball, men's basketball. You're talking about, you're assuming they're going to play the games. We're going to flip it back to football. You know me, I'm a football guy. Right now, it's spring practice is set for March 9th. Spring game set for the 16th. Any news on that's going to stay concrete, or is just kind of like basketball, just kind of taking it week by week?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, latest I heard was earlier today, actually, on a Zoom call, that March 9 is still a solid date for the start of spring practice. I think I heard they're going to practice March 9, 10, 11, and then it's spring break, and then they're off for like 10 days, and then they'll come back and, run the stretch of however many spring practice sessions they're going to get and play that spring game at Center Park Credit Union Stadium on the 16th. And certainly, you've seen the schedule or heard about the schedule. We got 2 Power Fives on the schedule this year, at Auburn and at North Carolina. With Army and Charlotte as the other 2 non-conference games before you get into conference play. So, on the positive side of that, you are playing 2 Power Fives. You get an opportunity. If you're ever going to get a shot at Auburn and North Carolina, this might be a pretty good time to take your best shot. And then because of COVID, Georgia State's got a lot of seniors that have decided that they do want to come back and play what we'll call their COVID-19 free season. And so Georgia State, in all honesty, they won 6 games this year and could have very well won 8 or 9.
Yeah.
But there could be, as experienced as they've been in it'll be 12 years that they've been playing college football. So I'm actually I'm looking forward to it simply because as well as we played at times this year, with as many guys that are returning, you can only have a positive outlook on what they could do this year.
Absolutely.
Dave,
I agree with you.
Thanks so much for coming on. We're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you next week. And hopefully we'll talk about some more basketball games. And we ran out of time, but I'm going to give you a week to think about this. We'll ask you next week. I'm going to give you this in advance. Do you have a sleeper outside of the Sunbelt? And do you have a sleeper in the Sunbelt that can make noise in the tournament? Think about that. We'll ask you that next week. All right. That way it'll give you time. And of course, the Big Ten, they've got 3 of the top 5, teams right now. And my alma mater's, 3rd in the country. So we'll see. It's a good thing your Panthers didn't play us this year. No, I'm just kidding.
I would have liked to have seen that game. Hey, Wayne and JJ, no matter what you're talking about, does it somehow always come back to Michigan?
Yeah.
No, that's not true.
Somehow, some way.
Man, negative, it always comes back to Georgia.
Guys, we're probably talking about the Daytona 500 last night, and somehow it came back to Michigan.
I know I shifted. We'll be talking about the Daytona 500 more here in a minute. Wayne's a big NASCAR guy, so.
Yeah, I used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. Wayne, you had a conversation with me off the phone talking about the ticket prices, how it's kind of changed everything.
Yeah, well, it used to be back in the 80s and early 90s that you could get a ticket to the car race, and the most expensive ticket might be about $30 or $40. Now 30 or 40 will get you some of the least desirable seats, and the most expensive ones are $100, $200, and I think that's why their attendance has dropped, because it's on TV. Why would you go to the racetrack and watch them if you can watch it on TV and save a few $100?
Well, that's true. And, the other thing that changed it for me, and I used to love to go out and cover Atlanta Motor Speedway and periodically go over to Talladega. And I loved it when, think about it back in the day with regards to teams. You had Kyle and Richard Petty. You had Bobby and Davey Allison. In other words, driving for the same, two-car team.
Yeah.
You had Dale Earnhardt Jr. Now you got some teams that are 4, 5, and 6 cars. It's all about money. I mean, and television dollars. I used to like to follow the guys I used to like to follow were Kyle Petty and Ron Bouchard.
Yeah.
The drivers were accessible.
Kyle Petty, I think most of his success was because of his crew chief, because he learned how to bend the rules better than any other crew chief. In fact, they hired his crew chief to be the NASCAR inspector after Kyle Petty had left that team. So how do you find the cheaters? Hire the best cheater to find them.
Well, but here's the thing, though: how many races did Kyle Petty win on the NASCAR circuit his entire career? Now, his father won 200. Kyle won 7 races.
7, right. Yeah. And all of them with that one team, though. I forget the name of the team, but I remember it was sponsored by Peak Antifreeze and Mellow Yellow Soda.
Mellow Yellow.
No.
I can imagine that car looks like,
Wow.
looks a little bright on the screen, I can imagine.
But I'm saying the one-off driver can't afford to run NASCAR anymore like they used to.
Yeah.
No. I mean, you got Team Jordan in there, 23XI Racing this year. Just everybody's coming into the racing game with all this money. Pitbull sponsors the car. The musician, sponsors and people are just coming into NASCAR from every which way. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I hope it's a good thing for NASCAR, but I'm with you, Dave. I used to like it, and to me, it was the restrictor plates. I liked it better when the cars were faster. I know it was a little bit more unsafe. We are approaching the 20-year anniversary of Dale Earnhardt's death at Daytona coming up in a couple days. I think I heard a stat: there has not been a death in NASCAR on a NASCAR track since that tragic day at Daytona. So it's gotten safer, but the sport has lost a lot of viewerships. And I think that was, unfortunately, a lot of the luster with a lot of casual fans like me is the danger of it, the wrecks. And now it's I'm glad it's a lot safer, but I think a lot of general fans have lost interest in that as well because of the restrictor plates and the little slower racing.
Yep, it went corporate. They went away from some historical tracks to go to the big tracks when they expanded across the country to Texas and Las Vegas and Chicago and maybe even Kansas City. But they went away from some of their smaller historical tracks where they had a great following back before it became a national sport. It used to be the only time you heard anything about NASCAR was ABC's Wide World of Sports on a Saturday afternoon, and that was it. And 9 times out of 10, they were talking about Richard Petty.
Yeah, or Cale Yarborough.
So it's changed a lot. It's gone corporate. It's become a big, big, big dollar sport. Unfortunately, has squeezed out some competitors and it has squeezed out some followers.
Dave, thanks a lot once again for coming on. We're out of time. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the NASCAR analysis this evening. I'm glad you stuck around for that. I really appreciate that.
And you thought I was just a stick and ball guy, didn't you?
No, I did not. I did not. No, you stuck it to me with a Michigan, though. I'll tell you that. We'll circle back. We'll as George or Joe Biden's press secretary said, we'll circle on back to my Wolverines next week on the show. We'll talk a little bit of Michigan basketball, a top 5 team. All right.
Wayne and JJ, don't let them talk about any Michigan the rest of the show.
We won't.
I'm going to steer this thing as far away from that city up there in Michigan as possible from now on.
Hey, John Beeline's name has surfaced as a potential candidate at Boston College for basketball.
Well, that'd be a great get for Boston College.
Of course it would be. He's got Michigan ties.
Well, thanks a lot. You know, we would have pounded Georgia State this year, but
I would have loved to have seen that game.
you know what? I would have loved to hear you call the game myself. That would have been
Yeah.
great.
In a non-COVID season with everybody
Right.
healthy, first game
Right.
of the year, I just would, I'm not saying we would have won.
No, I
but
understand.
I would have liked to have played that game.
Well, you know, the earlier you play a team like that, the better shot you got of beating them. I mean, you know, we'll see. I mean, the Big Ten's pretty good this year, but in that one game elimination, you just never know.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk to you all next week.
Hey,
Right.
thanks a lot for coming on again. Really appreciate it. Thanks for busting
see
my
you.
chops. Appreciate it.
I'm just kidding with you.
It's all right. I like it because I bust JJ's continuously over Georgia. So,
I love it.
All
I
right.
love it.
All right, that was Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers here on ATL Prime Sports, busting my chop. We'll go ahead and circle back over to the Daytona 500 talk here. Wayne, you and I talked off the air about the Daytona. We had a lot of extensive conversation. Let's finish it off with that, finish the show off with that, and that last historic lap.
Well, you know, the race started off just like any other Daytona 500. They went 15 laps, and then they had a weather delay that lasted 7 hours. And
Seven.
Yeah, you know,
during that race delay, one of the drivers, Ross Chastain, decided he was going to take a drive through the McDonald's and pick his team up some burgers there, and that was kind of a weird deal.
yeah, you can go check that out, listeners, on our Twitter account. Sports, I was able to retweet that video. You can go see it. It's a really unique video. He's in full race gear, the remnants of the Hans device around his neck, and he goes, "Hey, I want 6 of everything," pretty much. And they're like, "Are you racing right now?" He's like, "Yeah, we're racing." So,
Well,
really cool video, really cool perspective. But overall, what an interesting race, Wayne. We have Michael McDowell, who won the rain-delayed 500. He hadn't gotten a Cup Series win in 358 tries. So I guess 359th time's your charm.
well, what happened was, you know, they came back after that rain delay, and the dominant team, which you would have expected, was the Joe Gibbs Racing team, made up of Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Christopher Bell. And those 3 cars led a majority of that race up until the very last pit stop. And these teams like to pit with cars that are of their same make, and there's a limited amount of Toyotas left at the end of that race. And the Fords were way more organized on their pit stop. And when they came back out, 5 Fords were leading the race, and nobody could really do anything with them until the last lap. Michael McDowell got a little bit of a push from Austin Dillon, shoved him into Brad Keselowski, and Keselowski hits Logano. Those 2 guys split each other. And Michael McDowell goes right through the middle, ends up winning the race.
It was an unbelievable final lap. Watched the highlights late last night. Very exciting race if you're a NASCAR fan to start the season out. And hopefully you expect that for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
But I asked on the Twitter question, did Ross circle back in time to get to the Daytona 500? I mean, you know, everybody, this is, if Jen was up here, this is circle stuff. I mean, Wayne, I need to circle back to you. And you know, when I'm done, I'll circle back to JJ. Yeah. And then speaking of circling, we'll circle back to the show on Friday and talk about the Falcons because we really didn't talk much about them today. So we'll have to adjust and talk more on Friday.
Ross Chastain, who did that McDonald's thing during the rain delay, he actually finished 7th in the race.
Wow.
Pretty good finish.
Well, he did circle around the track several times then, so it was quite successful.
The McDonald's obviously was a performance enhancer. Obviously.
Right. Exactly, it was.
I didn't say that. You said that. I didn't say that. You said that.
Hey, if he was at Tennessee, he'd have got cash in the bag. So, I mean, think about that. Talk about a performance enhancer.
Yeah.
You get cash in the bag. You get to circle back to the 500. And you get to place. I mean, 7th place. That's worth a lot of money today, right, Wayne?
It really is. I mean, Denny Hamlin, one of those Joe Gibbs Fords, finished in the top 5. Avoided the big collisions and stuff, so that was good on him.
Well, guys, that's it. We're out of time. It's been a wonderful show. Sorry, everybody, we didn't get to talk more about the Falcons in detail. We did talk a little bit about J.J. Watt potentially going to the team. We talked about the new cap specialist for the Falcons and Chris Olsen. On Friday, we'll go ahead and talk about the Falcons more in detail. We'll have Deshaun Tate with us, formerly of 92.9 The Game in Atlanta, to talk some college basketball and some professional basketball. And it'll be some hoops. It'll be basketball on Friday, and NFL football and whatever else we can come up with. It'll be a 30-minute show from 1 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be live on ATL Prime Sports on Blog Talk Radio. You can catch the show at 1-347-205-9631. Again, let me see about that darn number. It's 1-347-205-9631, or you can catch it at www.blogtalkradio.com. We'll be live with Deshaun Tate, 1 to 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. JJ will be with us. I'll be with us. Wayne will be with us. And Mark Mancini will join us from Los Angeles. We know there's no snow in L.A. We do know there's snow in Memphis. Wayne, you stay safe. JJ, we might have some patches of ice in the morning in the ATL. Other than that, guys, good night. I've enjoyed it. And we'll see you on Friday, and we'll circle back to the Falcons then.
All right.
Circle back to the Falcons on Friday. Get you one, everybody.
All right.
Good night, everybody.